The vibrant personality with us today is Dr. Christian Donald Pentz, who is practicing right now in South Africa. He belongs to South Africa, and he is from Stellenbosch University. I hope I have spelled it correctly. I have pronounced it correctly. He specializes in marketing and related subjects like brand management, digital advertising, traditional, public relations, the entire gamut of subjects that come into the marketing arena. It's our good fortune that he is sharing his valuable time and space with us. We would use this opportunity to find out the situation and the way things are handled there, the way students move forward in their academic life, tackling these subjects. So let's hear from him. I have his permission to use the short name, so I'm happy to use the word Chris. Chris, can you tell us in detail about the way brands cope up with the acute competition? Because the number of brands are much more now. In the last 10 years, it has grown so many folds more. You have so many more media options. The media consumption habits have changed so drastically. So kindly take us through the details of how these things are handled by brands and brand custodians in South Africa. We would love to hear from you.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you in your wonderful city and at this wonderful university. You absolutely said Stellenbosch correctly. So as you said, I am a marketing professor at Stellenbosch University in South Africa, which is also a developing country. So as a developing country, we are obviously different than the companies in the developed world, but there is a very large appetite for products that are used all around the world. So we have the large brands in South Africa, so people want to drink Coca-Cola, they want to use Apple products, they want to wear Levi jeans. But I think a lot of companies are sensitive that our income brackets are different than in other markets. And I think a lot of businesses have learned not to be what we call ethnocentric. So when you are ethnocentric, you say the way we price the product in America, we don't have to adapt it. Let's just take it to Africa and they will buy it anyway. But I think a lot of companies are realizing we cannot do that. So I also think a lot of companies have realized that when you speak of a developing country, sometimes the assumption is made that they are all poor people or they are uneducated, so they cannot use technology. And it isn't really true. I can give you one example. There's a company that does it's called Meltwater, and they call it the World Digital Report. So every year they bring out a report and they tell us about media consumption, social media consumption, things like that. And one of the interesting things about this report is that South Africa has one of the highest mobile phone penetrations in the world. So on average, most South Africans own more than one mobile phone and even a smartphone. So if you make the assumption that people in poorer countries like South Africa do not use technology, you would have been wrong. Because what happens is people do use mobile phones. And what companies do is instead of just making a television advertisement, they communicate with you via SMS. So they send you a short text message to your phone and they give you a discount coupon and you can use that to buy a product. So once again, companies need to be careful not to be ethnocentric and they need to adapt to the local scene. Something else I can maybe tell you is you asked about media consumption. So digital is also a big thing in South Africa, and especially shorter videos or reels, like short videos on TikTok, for example, is very popular. But what we also find is that South African people want to see themselves represented in the advertisements. So if Coca-Cola makes an advertisement, the local people want to see local actors in the advertisement. And there is an example where you would have probably know the example where Coca-Cola put people's names on the cans. So they also put the names of South African people on the cans, but they made a television advertisement specifically with South African actors using South African names and South African music as well. So once again, we call it global localization. So you're a global firm, but you localize to the local context. So I think it's a really interesting space to play in, but you have to be careful not to, I want to say, offend your consumer. We cannot just use a mold that works in Europe, for example, and just press it down on South Africa, because I do not think the audience might relate to that. Okay, I hope this answers your question.
Wonderful. In fact, it's intriguing to note that many of the views what we have about a country like South Africa are totally different from the reality. And the way you say that it's people are tech savvy and technical products are being consumed quite a bit. Probably I think we need to fine tune our understanding about the market. I would at this juncture, let me also ask you this, add on to my earlier question. What is the ratio of the usage of traditional media like print and television versus digital? Which is more, of course, no prizes for guessing which is more, but what would be the ratio like, and what is the trend? You kindly highlight the trend.
It's difficult to give you exact numbers, but I think there is, as you say, there's definitely a switch more towards digital. So definitely, as I mentioned, things like user-generated content where people upload things, for example, on Instagram or TikTok, where people give reviews of products, for example. So especially, I think, as globally, usually the younger generation catch up more to those things. But we still have a lot of traditional media in South Africa as well. So many people still watch television. So we have a lot of television advertisements. So if there's a Rugby World Cup game on, people watch the rugby, they watch the cricket, and what the screen will do, the screen will narrow down a little bit, and there will be an advertisement for a product, and the screen will go down again, because they know that you're having a captive audience. So I think there is room for both traditional and for online or digital. We do, as you do in India as well, a lot of outdoor advertising. But even what we do is we have a lot of informal settlements, so where people live in an informal way. And then when we have small buses that transport people into those areas, and even on these buses, a lot of companies like the FMCGs, like Unilever or Procter & Gamble, they would put an advertisement on the side of this little bus, and that bus becomes a moving advertisement that goes into this little informal settlement. So once again, I think there's room for both. There's room for the traditional, but definitely, as you say, we are in the digital area, so we have to incorporate Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, things like that as well.
I think quite a bit these things are part of Indian advertising also. And we have bus shelters, and ads are pasted on buses, as you mentioned.
Yes,
inside also, even inside, I think the brands have started using it. In fact, every inch of space that's visible is nowadays being used for ads.
You use it, yes.
But beyond that, what I would remark about India is, here the content king is videos, and especially the young audience who are responsible for most of the brand consumption happening for premium brands.
Yes.
They consume more of digital as well as video content in the form of OTT.
Yes, yes.
I would request you to tell us how developed is there OTT in South Africa or anything very, very close to that? And what about the video watching habits?
Yes, video is once again, if I can go back to the World Digital Report, I cannot remember if South Africa is in the 5th or the 6th place now, but it's one of the countries in the world that spends the most time online. Online. So they spend many hours per week in any online environment. And I was thinking a little bit about that, and I was thinking, why would that be? And I think people are looking for content online. They are looking for content on YouTube, for example. And a lot of people cannot afford education, so they are educating themselves online. So they watch YouTube videos, for example, to educate themselves. So I think a lot of times when we think of videos from a marketing point of view, we think consumers watch videos just to see an ad, for example, or to watch content, or how an influencer is unboxing a new product or something like that. But sometimes a video can be educational as well. So I think a lot of businesses are also realizing this, and they might use educational videos in future to upskill people and to teach them more things. So once again, I really love this digital report, because it shows you exactly what is happening in countries all around the world. It's really something I can recommend to the audience as well. So it is called, you just type Meltwater, the Global Digital Report, and then the year, so 2026, gives you really interesting information. It tells you which countries uses the most Instagram, where they use Facebook. It tells you where countries use QR codes. So if I remember correctly, globally, about 50% of the respondents of the study uses QR codes. In certain countries, they use it a lot. In other countries, they don't. So once again, for us as marketers, it makes our lives interesting, especially for me as a global marketer, because if I take my product to France, maybe I could use a QR code. If I take it to China, maybe not, because they might not use QR codes. So it makes our lives really interesting.
Bang on, because the using video content for educative purposes is a wonderful insight you have just highlighted. In fact, this, since the young audience, the Gen Z, as they are called, they consume videos. I think that would be the next, I'm sure, presumably that's going to be the next step of using videos very widely. And slowly, I find in a university also textbooks are getting replaced. None of the students have any interest in going through textbooks. So probably, we have reasons to think that era is over now. Maybe, if you can take us through a little bit of what happens on the educative scene also for these subjects, what we are now discussing.
Yes.
Marketing, brand management, and the digital plus traditional advertising.
Yes. It makes my life really interesting. This year will be my 25th year as a lecturer. Mm-hmm. And when I started lecturing, we didn't even have PowerPoint slides. I don't know if you can, I think you might remember, but we had overhead projectors where you would put a transparency on a machine, yeah, and it would put it on the wall. And then all of a sudden we got PowerPoint and things like that.
There's no animation there.
There was no animation. So, and all was black and white, and it was really boring. And now we've made so much progress. I can recall when we had COVID in South Africa, as in many other countries, there was obviously a big lockdown, and we had to do all our classes from home. And we also did classes remotely from Stellenbosch University. And the university spent many big amounts of money to give us very complex machines in order to broadcast all our. So I felt like a plane pilot when I had to stand in front of that machine with all the buttons I had to push. But that's also something that we might have to look at in future, because at Stellenbosch University, we I don't have the exact figure, but I think we can take about 10% of the people that apply for our degree. So 90% of the people that apply, we cannot accommodate. And maybe in future, we must have a look at, can we provide digital education to people that do not have to come to a campus? And maybe even, as you said, to record this as a short video, because I think a lot of students cannot concentrate for 3 hours in a class, and then they lose track. But if we give them the video, they can watch it again and again and again. So that is maybe something we can consider. Obviously, in our world of marketing and branding and advertising, we cannot get away from AI. That's on top of us as well. So when I was a young lecturer, we didn't have AI. I'm sure you also did not. But now it's here, and we cannot wish it away. We have to embrace it. So we have to think very carefully how we will integrate AI into all our different modules, because we have to upskill our students, otherwise they get left behind. So that's one of the big challenges I'm facing at the moment for all our marketing focal areas, to try and figure out how do we address this? Because as you said, there are not really textbooks about this. Things just happen. And we need to make sure that we educate the students in the best possible way.
Thank you for mentioning the word AI, because that being one of your very strong areas of interest. I had not even mentioned about it. Now I remember that we need to really know your views, how you use AI to the best of your advantage, all those things, maybe along with your suggestions as to how a country like India can get the best out of AI in education also. Our students also, many of them have started using it, but I'm not sure whether it is with guidance. In fact, our university places a lot of emphasis on AI. So I'm really fascinated to know how you use AI to your advantage. And what are the suggestions, if you have any suggestions in this connection, please let us know about
Yes,
that.
I'm really not an expert, but I do realize, as I said, we cannot let it go. So we have to incorporate it in some other way. And I think what Stellenbosch University is doing at the moment is they have realized that before we can teach students, we need to upskill ourselves first.
Oh.
So what they are suggesting is they invite the staff to enroll for programs where the staff will be upskilled in terms of artificial intelligence. And then once we've completed some courses, we might be more ready to assist the students as well. Because I do not feel comfortable to educate someone in something that I don't really understand. So I think a lot of the staff in the next few months and years...
So the faculty needs to be trained first.
The faculty needs to be trained. So it's one thing of using AI, but it's another thing of using it in the correct way. So I think a lot of us will be educated, and then we will start incorporating it into our modules. And we are also speaking about offering courses for students in artificial intelligence. For example, maybe a diploma course or a short course, because you can use it to your advantage. But as you say, you have to use it in the correct way. You have to know how to write a prompt, for example, because if your prompt is incorrect, then what you put in is what it will give you. We also have to be careful of what the machine gives us, because some students just give it a prompt, they get a result, and they just hand that in as their work. And a lot of times it's not true. So the machine thinks of things that is not really true. They can't reference it, and then you have a problem because it wasn't real. So it's still, for me, that thing of use it to your advantage, but be very careful how you use it. And maybe before I forget, my biggest aim as being a lecturer is to get my students to think critically. And I'm worried that when the machine thinks for them too much, they will use or they will lose that ability to think critically. And then if they get a job or they go for a job interview and someone asks them a quick question, they cannot say, just wait, hang on, I just have to ask the machine. You have to have it in your mind. So use the machine, but also train your brain so that you don't become an uneducated human, if I can say it like that.
It was so wonderful that, you have already anticipated what I was planning to ask, and you have given the answer also for that. But I want to stretch this particular interaction a little bit. As you rightly said, it has to be used responsibly. And, it cannot replace thinking and the capacity of the brain, where, you become a dummy and, you just keep doing what AI tells you to do. So to what extent, how do you regulate this process of using AI, and how do you also ensure that the capacity, the talents of the students are retained, the creative talents are not spoiled by this? Because, people have a tendency, I have seen students especially get into a comfort zone. It will be over in 5 minutes. It will be over in 10. Whatever was taking them much longer now takes much shorter time, and they're able to get better results out of it. It should never hamper their progress by thinking that there's a standby who will sort out things in half a minute. So maybe something in those lines where we can ensure this.
It is really true, because as you say, we live in the era of instant gratification. So it means I do not want to wait for an answer. The other day I asked ChatGPT to draw me an infographic, and it took about 30 seconds. And after 30 seconds, I said, "Why are you so slow?" And I thought, do you know what you're doing? If I had to do this infographic, it would have taken me 3 days to do it. But after 30 seconds, I'm impatient with this machine because it hasn't given me an answer yet. So we want answers quickly and we want answers now. But to answer your question, we must get the balance right. So what I try and do is to get the students to first think of something, or to first think of a concept, or to first think of an idea, and then to take it further on artificial intelligence. When I do my honors classes, for example, I showed the students the other day, the I want to say the spaceship that went into space now. I don't know if you saw it, but on the news, they were doing an interview and a pot of Nutella floated by. I don't know if you saw that. So it was a live broadcast, and this pot of Nutella just floated by unprompted. And it became an iconic moment, and Nutella used it on social media. They made a lot of advertisements. They got a lot of views and impressions and a lot of attention on that. So I said to the students in class, I showed them the picture of the Nutella floating in space, and I said, you have to do 2 things now. You work for Nutella, you see this happening. How will you capture this moment and use it to the advantage of the brand? So work in a group and tell me, how will you promote this on social media or whatever? Once you've done that, I want you to ask ChatGPT how I don't know if the machine has a gender, how it would have done it. And then let's compare the two. And that worked very well for me, because first they had to think themselves, then the machine had to think. And what was interesting to me, the ideas that they came up with themselves were much closer related to what Nutella really did than the ideas that the machine gave them. So that human interaction or the human instinct worked really well for them. So then I told them, this is probably what you will do in the real job one day. Think first what you want to do, then use the AI to enhance your idea. But don't do everything from scratch on the AI, because then you lose your intuition or your human touch, and that is a problem. So I think that's one way in which I try and address this, but it's possibly not the perfect way, but I'm just practicing as we go along.
I would love to underline these last 2 sentences and preserve in my heart. It's so valuable. that, let them make use of their God-given gift first, and then, ratify or validate it through AI, or probably you get a few more inputs there. You can polish it off, you can fine tune it or whatever, rather than straight away using the gadget or.
Absolutely. And I think what I also always try and teach my marketing students, in the beginning, you asked me about competition and brands and things like that. You will know when we do positioning, for example, if you position your brand in the mind of the consumer, it's all about differentiating or the point of difference. And I really think in the future, if there's a human connection, there might be a point of difference from what the machine is giving. Because if we have 10 companies who has to think of a new idea and they all ask the machine for ideas, it will be, I don't want to say artificial, but it could be artificial generic ideas without that human touch. And if you were one agency, for example, who just brought in a human element, I think that might be a point of difference for you. So I really advocate that we do not stop thinking and using our own instinct, if I can say it like that.
It doesn't come as a surprise, since, in integrated marketing communication, you still have an element for personal selling. It is still there because of the value it imparts to the whole process of marketing. Personal selling pushes brands, you get the final signature on the dotted line only because of the personal selling part. So the human inputs are still, I would say, way ahead of what the machine gives. Of course, machine simplifies a lot of our work. AI does it, whatever can be done in days or months can be done in hours but beyond that, the thinking is with the human mind.
Absolutely.
That and needs to remain like that. And, we as faculty, I think it's our job to remind students that, use it only for these A, B, C, D, but let the remaining part of the alphabet be taken care of by your own brain.
Yes. So don't waste your brain with mundane tasks. So if it's data analytics or something like that, the machine can do the data. The machine can, and I will give you an example now, but the machine can look at all the data and make suggestions that you can use, for example. We have the largest retailer in South Africa. It's called ShopRite. It's the ShopRite Group. And they have a very sophisticated database of consumer data. So every time you buy a product, you swipe your loyalty card, and then obviously the card has your data, and the card knows what you're buying. And they just, I think last week, launched a new application where if you do online shopping, if you open your application, it's hyper personalized because the machine knows what you shop, what you buy all the time. So when I open my app, it gives me immediate suggestions of what the app thinks I will buy. It tells me you're going to buy 2 liters of milk, you are going to buy 1 kilogram of bananas, you are going to buy 3 chocolate slabs, you are going to buy this coffee. And I don't have to tell anything.
Based on your earlier consumption.
Based on earlier consumption. So it's like this. It gives me a page with the bananas. I do this and I buy the bananas. I do this and I buy a Coke. I do that and I say I don't want to have French fries today. It's so easy, hyper personalized, but the machine does it for me. It analyzed all my data, but humans still had to develop this. Humans had to think of the idea to get it into real life. And so I honestly think that there's symbiosis between people and machines. I mentioned earlier to you before the broadcast that people who do not use AI will not go lose their jobs. But people that use, or I can't even, I'm not saying it right now, but what it's implying is that you don't have to use AI, but you will lose your job to someone that actually uses it. So we cannot say, I never will use it, because then you will fall behind. But once again, the symbiosis between your human mind and the machine, we must get that connection right.
But I'm going off to a slightly different area. an area where, which is real in India, which is happening for brands generally, that, public relations as a discipline is now being perceived as more powerful than advertising. Since the younger generation, the Gen Z, they don't buy what an ad claims. They don't swallow what an ad gives. And they question. And ad is promotional in nature. The brand speaks about itself. Whereas PR being a third party endorsement, like media speaking about your brand, it has got more power, in which the brand custodians are realizing the immense power that PR wields. To such an extent that even brand launches are now being tried out through public relations instead of advertising. Is this phenomenon there in South Africa, or to what extent is PR growing there?
I think definitely, as you mentioned, is because people are skeptical about advertisements. So when I watch an advertisement, I do not trust the company, because why would I believe a big corporate company? What we also find is people trust other people.
Yeah.
So when I, for example, have to book a hotel on booking.com and the hotel tells me we are a very fancy hotel, I don't believe them. But I go and look at the reviews, and I read the reviews of people I've never met in my life, and I believe them. And if they say the hotel is nice, I book the hotel because someone else, not the firm, not the advertisement, told that to me. And I think it's the same principle that we can use for PR. So we have a lot of companies that actually use PR agencies, especially for crisis communication. So when something happens on social media and there is a crisis, someone found a rat in their chicken meal or something like that, the company has to get a PR person to handle the crisis for them, and they do it quite well. So I think definitely a lot of the large corporates are using PR to that extent, and also to address all the thousands of comments that people are making on social media.
Yeah.
So I don't think the firm itself should address those issues, because it's very technical and specialized. So anything where you need interaction with humans, I think there's a large market for PR, and it definitely happens in South Africa.
Even a brand moment, a brand sale is something to do with the human mind only. So to that extent, as you said, you don't trust an ad. And today's youngsters say precisely that. They don't trust an ad. And I understand 75% of the Americans have ad blockers installed. So where is the advertising industry headed in the first place? That's one question. Second question is, PR seems to be all set to take over. I was listening to a speaker just about a couple of months back. He said ads will be replaced by PR. It was a statement in an event, not even in a classroom or so, an authority on the subject. So I went and asked him. He said, no, that's happening already. So the power of PR, and where relationships call the shots, your bonding calls the shots, and not what you say about yourself. So that it's a very subtle shift that is happening. So happy to know that it's happening in.
It's happening, but I still want to argue a little bit that there is room for advertising, because as you as a marketer will know, we speak of touch points with the consumer. So why do we advertise? We inform, we remind, and we persuade people to buy products. So I believe there is a need for advertising, but there is a need for PR as well. So we need to find the balance correctly between all of them. I don't believe only advertising works. I don't believe only PR works. So I believe in a balance between all of them.
Yes, and there are tailor-made messages which public relations cannot deliver. For the brand, there are some messages, some brands are in command of certain areas. And if they just speak that, tell the consumer about it, the brand's interests are through already. So to that extent, advertising will always be there around. But there is a subtle shift happening, which I think also takes PR as a discipline forward. Nice to note that. I would very keenly look for your views on what, I mean, some of which have you have already passed on, like how to use AI and how to sort of program or plan the classroom sessions better, how to accommodate the students who don't get a slot, all those things. Apart from that, if you have any messages for today's students in India or South Africa or any part of the world, what would that be? How do they tackle the huge challenge in hand?
It is a huge challenge, and I have two children that are students at the moment, and I don't even know how to tell them what they should be doing. But I always tell people, and I want to come back to point of difference. I tell people, you have to be different from other people. When you write your CV, what will you write on the CV that's different from what other people are doing? I also tell people to upskill themselves and to not only do what they're supposed to be doing, but to do other things, to get involved with community outreach products, to help other people, to do a free internship so that you can show people that you are not lazy and that you are hardworking.
That's helpful, definitely, right?
Yes.
And internships is your passport to the job.
It gives you a foot in the door, but you can decide, will I go on a Greek holiday for 3 weeks, or will I go and make photocopies at an advertising agency for 3 weeks? But long term, it makes you different. So I very much believe in hard work. So life will not come, life doesn't owe you anything.
Yeah.
We cannot just stand with our hands and ask for a handout. We have to work for the handout. So you spoke about God-given talent earlier. We get talents that I believe that we must use, and every person gets talent, and I think we must use our talents to the best of our ability. So in short, I don't know if it really answers your question, but I believe in hard work. I believe in making yourself different. I believe in reading a lot. I don't know if people still read a lot, but you have to read, and you have to cultivate yourself. You have to listen to music. You have to, if you can, go to the theater. You have to go and watch a movie. You don't have to, but that's things that I believe. And you must exercise so that your brain can get some oxygen as well.
Wonderful. Word about digital versus traditional media. There is a lot of issues in the world of digital media because the credibility element is suspect, whereas traditional media they still maintain their sources, and there is some amount of credibility still attributed to traditional media. What is in your part of the world, with specific reference to South Africa, what is the scene out there, and how much are the youngsters promoting social media and discarding traditional media?
Yes, maybe I can come back to my children again. They don't like it if I speak about them, but they will not see this issue. So a lot of times we sit at the dinner table and my daughter would say, look at this on Instagram. And then my son would say, no, that's fake. It's not real. And a lot of times you don't know. And you don't know if it's real or if it's fake. I told my students the other day, we were speaking about the war, the Iranian war, and BBC actually on their website had two pictures, and next to the one picture they write real, and next to the other one they write fake, because obviously they verify all the news that they publish all the time. But we see a lot of videos on social media where the Burj Khalifa exploded with a missile attack, and it wasn't true. So
dangerous, I would say.
It's really dangerous, and you can say very dangerous things on social media, and people can get an uproar because of something that's fake. I saw something the other day. I think it was George Clooney. I think they say George Clooney murdered his wife or something like that. And if you don't verify, there might be a big problem. So luckily it wasn't true, but still, we don't know whether it's true or whether it's not true.
The worst thing is there's no accountability.
There's no accountability, but there's also no check. So I think in future, someone, maybe AI can do it for us, but something must it must go through a verification check. I think BBC does that. So they call it verify. So they verify the news to make sure that it's actually real. I really think we need things like that.
It was really wonderful interacting with you. I don't know whether we have passed the time or we still have time left, but one a quick sum up about Globcom.
Okay.
And since you had it there, and I'm sure you will have a lot to say about that.
Okay. Globcom is a really interesting project. I've been involved with Globcom for about, I think, 20 years now. And it started as a project, I think it started in Spain with Enrique. So Enrique Ordech is a very good friend of mine, and Dr. Volker Stolz from Germany. And Dr. Stolz wanted students from all around the world to interact with each other, PR students. So what they did was, we started small, but at the moment we are 13 universities from all around the world. And every year we give the students a brief. So they get a brief from a real company, and they have to develop a solution to the brief. So it's communication PR related. But the interesting thing about this competition or this project is for the 13 universities, they all have to work together. So there are 3 Indians in a team and 3 South Africans and 3 Germans and 3 from Australia, 3 from Lithuania, 3 from Spain, 3 from Portugal, 3 from America, 3 from Malaysia, and 3 from the United Arab Emirates, and they form a group. They've never seen each other before in person, and they get the brief in the group, and now you have a melting pot of culture. So if you have to write your CV about this, a lot of my students get a job because of Globcom, because when you go for an interview, someone will say, have you ever been in a conflict situation with someone? And then usually people say, yes, I had a fight with my sister or with my dad. These people say, oh yes, I was in a team with people from 13 countries. We had language differences, we had culture differences, we had time differences, we had educational differences. And then the employer says, wow, you've really learned a lot. So all the students work together on the brief, and they work virtually in whatever way they want to. And then they hand in the document. What then happens is we have a symposium all around the world every year. So we go to one of the countries that participate. Last year we were in, I have to remember now where we were last year. But the year before that we were in Abu Dhabi. I'll tell you now, I'm old, so I cannot always remember anymore. So we go to different countries. This year we are going to Barcelona. So because we have a Spanish client, an airline, and we are going to Barcelona, and what happens then is all the students are invited, and at the symposium, they meet each other in person. So then we group them into little groups again. In their group, they pitch the idea to a panel of experts, PR experts. They get wonderful feedback from people in industry, and then they present to a grand jury, and in the end, we select a winning team that gets the acknowledgement of being the global team of the year. So it is a very exciting PR communication project. And my students, I'm going to Barcelona with 13 of my students this year. So I'm really excited to see all my friends.
Pertain to UN SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals?
Yes. So it's actually one of the goals. So we do focus on the SDGs, and because it's an airline industry, there's a lot of talk about CSI and about sustainability and things like that. So what we have learned so far from this project is the airlines are actually doing a lot of good things to make sure that they are more sustainable, but I don't think people know this. So I think they want the public to know how much effort they are actually doing to commit to the planet and to make sure that the planet is a safer place. So yeah, I always learn a lot from all these wonderful projects.
So let me extend our very, very special word of thanks to you for adding so much to our our information, our knowledge, our insights, and the way we move forward. And it has been truly wonderful for me interacting with you. And I'm sure this, when circulated, it's going to make a lot of positive difference in the students' way of thinking and, evolving as a full-fledged personality on their journey forward. And I take it as a opportunity out of the blue which came to me. In fact, I was given this assignment just a few days back by Sai, and feel really happy that I'm here, and would love to keep in touch with you. And
Thank you. And it's a very big privilege for me as well.